So I want to start by sharing two pictures that are significant for me. This first picture was taken when I was active in my addictions and when I was struggling with various forms of mental illness, and the whole time I smiled. And maybe some of you can even relate to this idea of smiling on the outside while you're in pain on the inside. You wear the mask. And for me, basically, the world was always my stage because what people saw on the outside was so different than what was taking place on the inside. Because on the outside, people saw the person who was president of the school, was athlete of the year, captain of sports teams, national scholarship recipient. And actually, when I received that national scholarship as an outstanding community citizen here in Edmonton, I was still active in my addictions. And I remember thinking, this is such a joke. This is all an act. But for me, I had no idea how to talk about my pain. And because I didn't talk about my pain, who suffered more than anyone else? Me. So that's where this second image comes into play, because this was taken early in my sobriety. And it depicts what it was like all those years staying in the shadows of shame, embarrassment, guilt. Our voice is our greatest tool. But why would we talk about our pain if we think that we're going to be met with judgment? We won't. And so there's two key things that I want to do this morning. First, I want to talk about how to create the space where people feel comfortable asking for what they need. And secondly, hopefully to empower you to use your voice in times of need. But first, we're going to have a little bit of a quiz. Get ready. Here's your first question. 1 in 5 Canadians will experience mental illness or substance use disorder in their lifetime. Show hands who says, yep. And you're off to a horrible start. 1 in 3. As soon as you add words like substance use disorder and lifetime, now we're talking 1 in 3. So, Jeremy, you mentioned, 260, 270 people here. So between 80 and 90 people in this room at some point in their lifetime. I mean, that's so prevalent, right? These are some of the labels that I was given, and I hated every one of them. I mean, the labels, do they exist here in this room? In our workplaces? Absolutely. But it took me a long time to understand that the label does not define who I am. And this is even where language is important. You know, it's not just the addict. It's not the schizophrenic. It's the person struggling with addiction. It's the person struggling with schizophrenia. And in my experiences, in a span of 6 years, I was given 12 different pharmaceutical medications to try to find that balance. And while I did not choose to have mental illness, I did not choose to have addictions, I can certainly choose what I'm going to do about it. And I'll share a little bit about how I was able to kind of get from that victim mentality into somebody who's been able to kind of embrace where I'm at. Question 2. The most common form of mental illness is depression. Show hands who says true. And some of you are 0 for 2. The most common form rhymes with schmanxiety. Any ideas? Do you ever notice that when you're anxious or you're feeling overwhelmed, what do your hands do? Yeah, they fidget. Do you know why your hands fidget? Because your body intuitively knows that there's key acupressure points in your hands that can assist you in times of anxiety. So take your left hand, put it in front of your face. 4 fingers, if you have 4 fingers, put them up at the roof. Left thumb going to go towards that wall. You're going to see a V, a groove. Take your right thumb, put your right thumb in that groove, and massage that area back and forth. And while you're doing that, is it painful for some of you? Yeah. The pain will eventually dissipate. It works for your right hand as well. Don't do this while you're driving. But if you do this for between 1 to 2 minutes, you can actually regulate the system. So the next time you're feeling anxious, overwhelmed, this can be the go-to tool. It works for me. Okay, we're fine. We're already on to question number 3. An interesting one. If you don't poop, you die. Show hands who says true. Yes? All right, get ready. This was coming at you. Football coming your way. Oh, that came fast. Yeah. Actually, I used to hand out metal water bottles. And safety. I mean, actually, the person in the front row I thought was ready because we connected. And so I grabbed the metal water bottle from the stage, and I tried to be sneaky. I did one of these. No, he was not ready. Right off the head. So now I go with stress balls. Anyway, back to this question. I was speaking at a nursing conference recently. We came to the general consensus that usually by day 7, if you have not had a bowel movement, you're going to require an enema. My point is, a lot of people are emotionally constipated. That was me. I mean, I had no idea how to be with emotions like sadness, shame. I knew anger. But see, if you think about a garbage bag, if you have a garbage bag full of clothes, and if you put more and more clothes inside that bag, what is eventually going to happen to the bag? Burst, spill out. Same thing with emotions. We were given emotions so that we could express them. If we do not express them, they literally become trapped within. And this is where sometimes people say, I don't know what happened to me today. I just lost it. Right? What'd you lose? Often it's because you didn't manage the emotions effectively. At your table, please take 30 seconds to discuss the following question. Do you find that you are able to respond the same way to your emotional pain as your physical pain? Why or why not? 30 seconds, go. $20 seconds left. $10 seconds. All right. Let's have a quick chat. I know that there's some mics available. Is anybody willing to share whether or not you feel as though you are able to manage emotional similar to physical? What? Oh, let her rip. Oh, you got a good booming voice. Oh, wow. I'm impressed.
Physical pain is everybody's willing to share how they bumped their elbow and now it hurts. Went for a run and they pulled a muscle. Everybody's willing to say, hey, look what I did to cause this physical pain. Or look what happened to me and now I hurt.
Right.
Physical being. Emotional is far more personal.
Uh-huh.
I don't want to tell you why I'm in pain emotionally because I'm exposing something personal to me, something that matters. And I risk that you're going to judge me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well said. A big round of applause for being vulnerable. Agreed. I mean, I don't know. Let's say that you're playing catch with someone, you miss the ball smokes you in the nose. Are you going to seek help immediately? Typically. And it's interesting, especially with mental illness, sometimes addictions, we wait till that tipping point when things get really bad before we seek out help. I mean, even if you think about with cancer, somebody who is at stage 4 would never say to someone who's at stage 1, what are you doing here so soon, right? I mean, the same thing really needs to be applied. This is where I'm going with everything. At the end of the day, should you be responding the same to your emotional as physical? Yes or no? If you do not, this is kind of what we already talked about, right? If you do not manage the emotional pain, does it have the potential to transform into physical ailments? Yes or no? So just keep this at the back of your mind while we progress throughout the rest of this morning. Question number, wait. I forgot about this one. Think about this in the context of the workplace. Do you find that you're able to effectively communicate those needs in the workplace? I mean, you touched on it before. Sometimes you feel a little vulnerable. And do you ever find that even if somebody has experienced, trauma, a loss, and then people talk, right? And then they come back to work, you're not quite sure how to handle the situation. Does that ever happen to you? So anytime before I speak for a company, I always ask, is there anything that I need to know about before I come? Has there been recent trauma, recent suicides? I want to share with you a letter that was written by a man named Fred, who's a manager in Regina, and he had lost his niece to suicide. But this is the letter that he sent his team as he returned to work. Here's what he says. On November 4th, I found out that my 13-year-old niece died by suicide. I spent the last week with my family as we tried to process the news. While the funeral added a sense of finality to this tragedy, the feelings associated with this certainly comes in waves. I do want to mention that I'm open to talking about this, but ask that you're mindful of the timing. Ideally, I would prefer to avoid having multiple discussions back to back in a given day. Coming back to work has allowed me to focus on other things, which helps as I continue to move forward with a normal life. Although I don't work with each of you on a regular basis, I do think it's important for me to share this to provide some context should you find that you are experiencing me differently. And in closing, Fred says, if you do find this, I ask that you grant me some grace, but still hold me accountable. What do you think? What did Fred do there? He was pretty clear. He was pretty direct. People around him knew, A, what was going on, and B, how to assertively approach the situation, right? I love the fact that Fred did not shy away from the fact that this was a death by suicide. Because what happened is other people in his place of work said their experiences. And so many times these conversations kind of get swept under the rug. What motivates me more than anything is that our kids and our youth are always watching us. Always. And if we can't have these conversations, then why the hell should they, right? Okay, now we're on to question 4. You'll perform better under moderate levels of stress than no stress at all. Who says true? Yes. We're going to go this way this time. Coming at you. With the mug in hand, it's a successful throw. Well done. Any of you familiar with something that's called Yerkes-Dodson's Law? That's why we're here. Yerkes-Dodson's Law says this: you need a little bit of stress to perform. You will have your most optimal performance under moderate levels of stress. When your stress levels become too high, what happens to your performance? Does it increase or decrease? To demonstrate this, I'm going to call on one brave volunteer. You just have to come up to the front and catch some stress balls. Is anybody willing to catch a few stress balls? Oh, okay, a big round of applause as she makes her way to the front. Perfect. And your name, sorry? Brenda. Welcome. Watch your step. Brenda, can you stand right there? I'm going to toss you these 5 stress balls. I'm going to tell you exactly where they're going. When you catch them, Brenda, can you put them on the ground by your left foot? Make sense? Yeah. This first one is going to come right at you. Nice. This is going to come up higher. This is going to come lower. Going to your left. A bonus ball, Brenda. A big round of applause. Don't go anywhere. For this one, all that you have to do is just catch them. Make sense? Yeah. And ready. Yeah. Pretty good. Big round of applause for Brenda. Okay, actually, Brenda, can you keep this football in case that caused you some stress? Okay. Have a seat. We're going to break this down. Here's your visual. Brenda, you can still walk and talk. For that first one, were you bored? Were you bored when stress balls were flying at you, yes or no? No, most people wouldn't be. Did you find that you had to focus on the task at hand? How would you say your performance was for that first one? It was so good. You were 5 for 5. You had optimal performance right in the middle. Oh, Brenda, for that second one, I don't know, did you feel a little anxious? A tad, maybe a little overwhelmed? Brenda, if I threw stress balls at you all day long, you might eventually cry. You might have a meltdown. You throw them back. Anger. Yes. So pay attention. Where do you fall? Do you find that every day you're able to go to your place of work, you're able to focus on the task at hand, you're proud of the way that you perform, or do you find that you are always anxious, overwhelmed, if even one more thing comes across my plate, I might lose it? If so, everything starts with awareness, and 1 in 4 working Canadians actually identify themselves anxious and overwhelmed. Where do you think it might make some sense to potentially turn to drugs, alcohol, gambling, self-harm? On the left side or the right side? Yeah, and that's the problem, right? If you're a little anxious, drugs, alcohol has the ability to take some of that away, which is the segue into question 5. An alcoholic does not have a drinking problem, but rather a living problem. Who says true? That was the first hand up. It's coming at you. Get ready. Yeah, nice. As an alcoholic, when I stopped drinking, did my problems immediately go away? Yes or no? The problem was never in the bottle. Not everybody who gambles becomes a compulsive gambler, right? Not everyone who drinks becomes an alcoholic. A living problem. Any of you familiar with Russell Brand, actor, comedian? He has a lot of years of sobriety, but he says this: drugs and alcohol, it's not my problem. Reality is my problem. Drugs and alcohol, that's my solution. And for me, all those years struggling with addictions, do you think that I feared life, or do you think that I feared death? Life. Honestly, I had no clue how to live. Every day was kind of flirting with death. That was comfortable, I guess, in a twisted way. But living is really what it comes down to, a relationship with self. Addictions for me is really a way to live outside of self so that we don't have to be with self. Therefore, recovery essentially has to start from within. What's happening here? I'm not giving you any ideas. But you go on to good old eBay, you buy that sleeve, and you can put it over that can of beer. If someone is coming to your place of work with 12 cans of Coke, do you need that much caffeine? One man was coming to his place of work every day with a 5-pound bag of oranges. Do you need that much vitamin C? Any ideas what he was doing? Injecting with vodka. Yes, I'm not going to ask how you know that, but you're correct. Yeah. My point is, we get pretty sneaky and pretty clever the ways that we try to get what we need, not even want. Question number 6, trauma. Trauma changes the way that your system responds to stress. Who says true? Okay, this one is going a little farther back. Get ready. Oh, that's coming so fast. I'm sorry. You're almost asleep, so I had to elevate. Just shout out some things that can happen to us in life that are traumatic in nature. Forest fire, good. What else? Loss of a loved one. Job loss, good. Divorce, car accident. How many of you are familiar with the autonomic nervous system? Show hands. Nice. Let me go through this as a refresher for some of you, short and sweet. This is your visual. 2 key parts, sympathetic, parasympathetic. Let's say that you're driving here to the Delta this morning or whenever you arrived and a car cuts you off. What happens to your system? Does everything just calm down? No. What happens to your heart rate? What happens to your blood pressure? Muscles? As soon as there's a threat, it's a sympathetic system that's activated and it says, get ready. This is your fight, flight. If those aren't options, we will freeze. So let's say that 15 seconds pass after that car cuts you off. That car is long gone and you realize, I'm okay. I'm safe. There's no longer a threat. At that point, the parasympathetic system kicks in and brings everything back into a nice state of balance. Does that make sense? You have a nice ebb and flow in a healthy autonomic nervous system. Because here's the key. For people who've gone through trauma, it changes the entire way that our system reacts and responds to stress. And sometimes things happen to us in life that are so painful that our body understands that should this trauma surface, it's going to be really hard to walk through life. So our body actually suppresses and stores that trauma, buries it in a way to protect us. And at that point, it makes sense to reach out to maybe drugs, alcohol, self-harm to make sure that everything stays inside. But if that person is able to one day walk away from a life of destruction, have support around them, be in a position of strength, the body finally says, all right, I've kept this inside for so long, it's time to release this. And that's where often people experience flashbacks. The only reason I'm sharing that is because that's what happened to me. My flashbacks came probably 6 years ago, and I started to recall being sexually abused throughout my entire childhood. I had no idea that that stuff was even in there. And I led a life of such self-destruction. I was always trying to harm or kill myself without an understanding of the why. This model, which I'll walk you through by Peter Levine, helped give me some of the why. And it works for various forms of trauma, but I want to walk you through it as that kid, me that kid. And every time that that door opened, I could not fight. I could not flee. Basically, I just froze. And after these events took place, nobody came into that room and said, "Al, you're okay now. Do you need a hug? Do you need to cry? Do you need to release some of that emotion?" That was not there. So what happens for someone like me is my system got stuck on, as you can see at the top. What does that look like? Think of that as the gas pedal down, go, go, go. See, I went through life ready. Sympathetic system activated. Why? Well, I had to be, right? If I'm not, I'm vulnerable. So alcohol, is that a central nervous system stimulant or a central nervous system depressant? You think about someone like me. All systems go. The very first time that I drink alcohol, what's going to naturally happen to my system? First time in my life, I feel what people probably call normal. I feel calm. If someone has a positive experience from something, do you think that they might take it again? Yes or no? And sometimes people go through trauma. The system can fluctuate where it's stuck on, off. They go back and forth. What does it look like if the system's stuck off? This is the flat affect. There's no emotion. They isolate. They withdraw. They underperform. If this individual comes across a central nervous system stimulant, such as your amphetamines, coke, meth, first time, bang, they come to life. There's a social function like this. They feel like they can be a social butterfly. If there's a reward, do you think that they might take that again? For me, addiction is about one word, and that is connection, right? I bonded to something in a way to regulate the system. When we don't have the tools to regulate the system, we grab at straws. It is natural to want to leave pain behind and find pleasure. This is what fuels a lot of behaviors. This is the same thing with self-harm. And self-harm, by the way, cutting, poisoning, this is not just happening with teenage girls. You know, I see this in the workplace. I see this with managers. Actually, in Vancouver recently, a male who's probably 45 approaches me, says nothing. Tears are coming down his cheek. He rolls back his sleeve, fresh cut marks from that morning. Now we got to ask ourselves why. What drives the behavior? Pain? I mean, because basically, if we don't have the ability or feel strong enough to articulate our pain verbally, we're saying, look at me. Something is happening that's really painful, but I don't know how to tell you, so I'm going to show you. And sometimes we don't know how to handle this. And I'll share a model that's worked for me to approach these situations that sometimes can be uncomfortable. But all that he's trying to do is regulate the system to bring it into balance. And as a counselor, it's not 99%. For me, it's 100% of people who struggle with addictions that are in pain. The short and sweet, they lack the tools to manage the pain. So growing up, I didn't have these tools to regulate the system in a healthy way. But there's something that you can do, which you do every day anyway, that can help regulate the system. This one rhymes with breathing. Any ideas? Okay, everybody stand up, please. So take your left hand, put it over your navel. When I count to 3, I'm going to ask that you take 3 deep breaths in. Well, we'll do one at a time. But when we do this, please pay attention to where your breath goes. Do you find that it's trapped in the chest, or are you able to have a nice rise and fall? Because especially for people who've gone through trauma, breath gets trapped in chest. So hand over your navel. 1, 2, 3. Deep breath in. Exhale. Deep breath in. Exhale. And last one. Exhale. All right, well done. Have a seat. If you focus on breath for 2 minutes, you can regulate the system in a healthy way. If you're ever feeling anxious, overwhelmed, that is your essential tool. This is the power of breath. There's a lot of schools, especially in Asia, the 5-year-olds, day one, they don't learn about shapes. They don't learn about colors. You know what they learn on day one? Breathing. Because they understand that it is so fundamental to our wellness. Does that model by Peter Levine make some sense? Off we go. This one's tough. Suicide affects us at a very personal level. Question 7, suicide is not about death, but rather an escape. Who says true? Agreed. The best metaphor for me, you think about the Twin Towers, New York City. When the planes initially hit the towers, on some of that raw footage, you could see people jumping from 1, 2, 300 feet off the ground. Did they want to die? What are they doing? Essentially, this picture was taken on my wedding day. That's me, my best friend, Justin Andres. I never had a brother. Justin was the closest thing I've ever had to as a brother. We had very similar journeys. We both struggled with mental health issues, addictions. 1 year after that picture is taken, I get the call that Justin died by suicide. And that rocked my world. I was a counselor at the time, and I took it really personal. And I learned so much. I learned how to grieve sober. I had never done that. I think for me, the biggest takeaway was this understanding that you can lead a horse to water, but you cannot make it drink, right? This is the same if it's in your personal life or your place of work. There really is only so much that you can do for the people around you. What I've learned is when you feel, because you feel first. I could go through all the signs. I mean, at the end of the day, for me, what trumps everything is guts. If you think that there's a problem, there probably is. But denial is a more comfortable place to live, right? I think that we have to do a better job of asking the question when we feel, are you feeling suicidal? And that question sucks. And I think that often we fear asking the question because we fear the response. What happens if the person says, yes? Oh, now it's real. And sometimes we have this natural reaction to just talk, when elders always remind us there's a reason that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, right? So it's so prevalent. I said this before, but this is an issue that I think we have to put a stronger voice towards. People often ask, why'd you get the JA, the Justin Andres? That's what it is. I put it on my throat chalk. I traced over his initials because it's a reminder for me to put a voice to these issues, and for myself to ensure that I'm also talking about some of my pain. But there's so many people who are in pain, and as I said before, they lack the tools to manage the pain. And number 8 has to do with fixing. It's not your job to fix someone. Who says true? You ever try? Did it work? No. You are correct. At your table, please take 1 minute to talk about what you do when somebody is in distress. Let's say it's in your place of work. You know that somebody is struggling at an emotional level. What do you do? What do you say? Please take a minute and then we'll chat. Let me give you the most effective approach for me. This has worked more than anything else. If you just approach, and I don't care if it's a stranger or someone you know very well, your kid, your colleague, you approach them and you say something like, I don't mean to pry. I just wanted to let you know I'm concerned. I just wanted to let you know I'd be more than happy to listen if you ever needed to talk. Done. You know why that's so powerful? I think that we have 2 basic needs. The first one, see me. Second one, hear me. You put a statement like this out there, you just said, I see you, and you have now given them an invitation to be heard. But whether or not they act on that invite, is that in your control or out of your control? It's completely out. We cannot put this out there if we are not ready for them to take us up on it. That might happen that day. It might happen later that week. It might happen in a month, a year. But what happens if the person's finally ready to talk and they approach you and you say, sorry, I just got to get off to this meeting, or the phone rings, sorry, just got to take this. Do you think that they will progressively move forward in their quest for help or go backwards? So this is where it is essential to drop what you're doing, validate the courage that it took, and then understand that it is not your job to fix them, but to listen. My mental health struggles started when I was 14, escalate when I'm in grade 11, 12. All the signs are there, but you know what? Not one teacher approached me. What's the message that we get when we're in pain and nobody approaches us? And I know that they cared, but they did not know what to do with me. They could talk to my parents. Now, probably 6 years later, I'm in Edmonton. I'm a student at the University of Alberta in a class with more than 300 other students. The professor, Ian McNeil, walks up to me, and he says, come to my office, Al. Let's talk. I've talked to the man a handful of times. I honestly don't know why he approached me that day. So I do remember that afternoon thinking, okay, I'll take a risk. And I kind of zoom by his door on the 3rd floor. It's wide open. So eventually I walk in. Ian says, have a seat, Al. I sit. Then he leans forward and he says, how are you doing today, Allan? That's a little different than the robotic, how are you doing, right? Which is just a greeting. I'm saying it changes when people use the word today and your name. But the kicker is 7% of the way that we communicate is verbal. 7%. The other 93 is coming from what? Yeah, body language, mannerisms. Everything about Ian screamed compassion. And so I sat there and I thought, okay, Ian. And I kind of removed the mask for the first time and I talked. I talked for 10 minutes. The man did not fix me. Ian understood that we all want power. We all want control. So he basically spun it back at me. Kind of that $1 million question, are you happy? No, I'm not happy. What are you going to do about it? So what he did is then he gave me resources. Same thing in our places of work, right? We give them resources. And then at that point I realized if I don't utilize these resources, I'm not going to succeed at an academic level. So I started to get note takers, tutors. I wrote exams in rooms by myself. That was so embarrassing. It was difficult for ego, for pride, but I knew that I had to access the resources. And then what Ian just did is he continuously checked in. So I'm saying this is the same approach that we can use in our places of work, right? Give them the power, give them the control, give them the resources. If safety is at stake, safety trumps everything. We know this. But does this approach make some sense? Okay. Because for me, in those 10 minutes, Ian McNeil changed my entire life because he took the time to see a young man who's in pain, and he took the time to listen, not fix. Sometimes after I put this statement out there and they're ready, I hear this. How many of you have heard this before? They call you, they approach you, they walk in your space, and they say, you cannot possibly understand what I've gone through. You ever hear that? And if you say, oh, yes, I can. I went through abuse. No. This is not about us, this is about them. 4 powerful words to respond with. Help me to understand. You do that. Now you watch what happens, because now there's a shift of energy. It goes from me to them. The moment that they start to talk, what happens? I would say healing. Darkness cannot survive in light. I think that this is one of the greatest gifts that we can give people, the space where they feel comfortable talking about what they need. And then, as I said before, we can give them resources. Number 9 is an interesting one. Time heals all wounds. Who says true? educated. Well done. Time provides us with the opportunity to heal. If we do nothing with the time that we've been given, then healing cannot take place. So I grew up small town Saskatchewan. Small. 4.5 roads. That last half road, gravel. I remember being 12. I'm on my bike. I'm cruising. I'm flying around the corner. And all of a sudden, everything starts to lean, and I realize I'm going to fall. So my left arm starts skidding across the gravel road. Basically, just becomes one with the road. I collapse in the ditch. 3 nurses in the community. What are the odds? The one nurse, her name was Joanne, sees this go down. She runs across the road. She lifts me out from the wreckage, leads me into her home, into her washroom. And then she's rummaging through the cupboards. First thing that Joanne gets out, peroxide. Second thing, scrub brush. Third thing, Q-tips. Oh, I remember sitting in that washroom, gaping wound. She takes the bottle of peroxide, just glug, glug. Oh, I scream. I'm not a medical professional. I don't know if this is legit. She takes the scrub brush. She goes to town. Oh, I scream again. Last thing Joanne does, she takes Q-tips, she goes in there, and she removes every last bit of gravel, grit, debris. But what did she do? She cleaned the wound. If you have a clean wound, you cannot stop the process of healing. It cannot be done. Same thing with emotions. If you're willing to stop deflecting, actually focus on what's going on inside, look at some of that pain, you cannot stop that process of healing. But it's painful, right? It was really painful for me to do that work because, I was a runner. I left home as soon as I was 16. I went to a private school. As soon as I finished that, I'm off to Holland for a year, traveling all over Europe. Then I'm off to Australia. I moved 12 times in a span of 6 years as a young adult. Finally to realize, the problem is not out here, right? The problem has been inside the whole damn time. And only once I stopped running, once I started to actually look at some of that shame, anger, could healing be possible? But see, sometimes I think we have this image in our minds that healing is this beautiful. No, it's ugly, right? It's work, it's painful, but the rewards are numerous. And question number 10, the last one I will ask you in this quiz. You stress about things that are out of your control. Who says true? Let me give you the tool that works for me more than anything. This is your visual. I meet with a lot of people and they say, Al, I'm so stressed. And I'll say, what's causing you stress? Everything. If you cannot pinpoint what your stressor is, how do you move through it? Step 1, identify your stressor. Think about for yourself right now, whether it's in your place of work or personal life, your greatest stressor. Identify it. Step 2, think about what's in your control about that stressor. Write it down on the left side. On the right side, you're going to start writing down things that are out of your control. Does that activity make sense how it can be done? Let's just brainstorm briefly. Shout out some things that are completely in your control in this life. That's right. What about you? Me. Your response to any given situation. Good. What else? Yep, my actions, my thoughts, my happiness. What are some things in life that are completely out of your control? Yeah, there's a lot. I was doing an event last week and someone said, my wife is causing me the most stress, and I'm like, we're not even going to go there. But the side that's out of your control can go on forever. So after you've done this, identified the stressor, broken it down, if you rip that piece of paper down the middle, what could you do with the side that's out of your control? Yeah, rip it up, burn it, bury it, put it in a balloon. I don't care. Get rid of it. Where are you going to shift your focus? To what's in your control. And as soon as you do that, you will immediately be in a position of power and control. The definition of anxiety for me is pretty simple. It's trying to control the things that are out of your control. So if you're ever feeling really anxious and overwhelmed, think about this tool, take the time, I just spit all over the place. Take the time to step back and identify what's in your control and out of your control. Does this make sense? All right. I have learned that if you create the space around a common theme, people will come. I go to a lot of different communities, a lot of different workplaces where people say, oh, that's great, Al, where you live, that there's support groups for whatever, depression, anxiety, gambling. Unfortunately, it's not in my community. If you think that there's a need, there probably is, and I would encourage you to create the space. When I lived here in Edmonton, I was also a compulsive gambler. I would go to these meetings, these support groups for compulsive gamblers. There were never young men who struggled with this, who showed up. I mean, we struggled, but they didn't show up. And I just felt even more alienated, more alone. So I decided to create my own group. I call all these churches because I thought a church would let me rent out the basement. So I finally find a pastor who lets me rent out the church basement. And I start putting up posters all over the U of A campus, all over the city. And then, I think her name's Suling Go. Global News, does that make sense? She calls me and she says, let's do a story on this. Awesome, good. Anyway, getting all this traction, the message is getting out there. So Wednesday, 7 o'clock was my first meeting. I was so confident that people were going to come. You know those crafts of coffee in the room next door? I had 2 of those. I had tea. I bought cookies. I had creamer. Like, I was ready. 7 o'clock. I'm sitting at the table. I have all the other chairs out. Who's there? Me. 7:15. Me. 7:30. 8 o'clock. Nobody came. Nobody came. So the second week, 7 o'clock, me. 7:15, I heard footsteps. I'm like, oh! Nope. You know who it was? It was the pastor, seeing if I was legit. And he didn't even want coffee. So now we're into the third week. 7 o'clock, me. 7:15, me. Probably 7:20, I hear footsteps. I'm thinking, it's probably the pastor. No, it's a young woman who walks into the room, no doubt expecting to see a room full of people, sees that it's just me, turns around, runs up the stairs. And I said, hell no. I waited this long. I didn't physically grab her or anything. But I get her back into the space. Me and her, 2 people, phenomenal. Phenomenal. Because we both were struggling with something, and we could have an open conversation about it. Healing took place. Guess what happened the next week? She's back, and there's someone else. Now there's 3. And the next week, 5. I'm saying that if we create the space, people come. One of my downfalls is I always thought that I was the only person struggling with various issues. And that's what put me in this place of isolation, right? I alienated myself from others. And no doubt, each of you are going through struggles, but this is where we've got to put a voice to some of our pain and understand that we're not alone in this. So I wish you could see my eyes in this. I actually tried to enhance this. This picture, like, I know exactly what was taking place at this time. I was teaching special ed. I cropped out the students. But this is at a time when I was given 1 month to live if I didn't change what I was doing. And I knew that. I mean, at this point in my life, it was just a life fueled with alcohol and gambling. I would go teach special ed. I would go straight to the River Creek Casino. I would stay there till 5, 6 in the morning. I'd go home. I would quickly prep, and I would just repeat. There was no such thing as, eating, sleeping. The thing that saddens me is the whole time, what do? I smile. And just because someone smiles does not mean that they are happy. And I just remember feeling this incredible sadness because there wasn't a single person in my life that actually knew what I was going through. Now, the interesting thing is, just over a week ago, I was speaking at the River Creek Casino. I mean, this is probably 10-and-a-half-year turnaround. The last time that I stepped foot at the River Creek Casino, which was my house, I spent more time there, right, was when that picture was taken. So that was full circle, just over a week ago. And I was I was really scared, nervous, and where the cab dropped me off was right by that card room door that I used to always walk out of at 5, 6 in the morning, just feeling so dejected. So Edmonton is this twisted place for me of sadness and yet immense gratitude. But I guess for me, I was always the victim back then. And then I meet with this elder, and he says, Al, you are not the only person who struggled with mental illness. You are not the only person who struggled with addictions. And Al, you're not the only person who's been sexually abused. If you want something different, go get it, because this world owes you nothing. Huh? Well, I was pretty mad. I was really mad. But is there truth in a statement like that? Yeah, I could have said it nicer. But there's some truth. So then there's a shift. And what I started to do is I started to surround myself with other people who spoke my language, meaning I got myself into these spaces where people got me, right? Again, we don't want to be fixed. For me, I just wanted to be understood. So I started getting myself into Gamblers Anonymous. I got myself into Alcoholics Anonymous. I got myself into the bipolar support groups. Nothing for me was as painful or as difficult as getting myself into the Saskatoon Sexual Assault Center for other men who have been sexually abused. So after my flashbacks came, I was not doing well. I was not doing well. And I knew I had to do something. This was the second group ever of its kind to exist in Saskatoon. I honestly didn't know if I could physically get myself into that space. I got there, and there's one other man, and that did not help because I already knew that we don't talk about this stuff. I can't remember what the counselor said, but I do remember I'm trying to respond, and after, 15, 20 seconds tops, I broke. And I just wanted to get the hell out of that room. Then, the only other man there looks at me, and he says the 6 words that saved my life. And he said, "It's okay, Al. I get it." Like, I could not have gotten that gift from anywhere else. The only reason I'm sharing that story with you is because this is how it works. Sometimes you have to be so vulnerable. You have to take a risk to be able to get the reward. And in that situation, I got the ultimate reward. And I get the vulnerability. I get the fear that comes from taking these steps, but I also get the rewards. That's what I got now, which is mind-blowing. Mind-blowing. That other picture, I did not have friends, right? In addictions, we don't have friends. We don't have relationships. I say we take hostages. I didn't have integrity. But it's interesting when you allow yourself to be vulnerable, when you take risks, what can happen, and when you have a little bit of hope. And shame is one of those things that damn near killed me. Shame is toxic. But what I've learned is the more that we put a voice to our shame, the freer we become. I still find life really hard, but I also find it really rewarding. So this is I have these bracelets. They're Born Resilient. They're at the table in the back too. If it can be of benefit, help yourself. For me, the biggest criticism of the last book that I wrote, Born Resilient, was that people would say, nah. You're not born resilient. This is a skill that you must acquire. And I thought, yeah, I get that to some degree, but don't tell me that there isn't something in us that is so resilient, right? We come into this world kicking and screaming. If someone puts your head underwater, what are you going to do? You're going to fight. If somebody chokes you, what are you going to do? You're going to fight. I meet with way too many people who are ready to throw in the towel. They have their suicide letter, or they're ready to just walk. And I think that sometimes we have to go back to this resilient nature, this piece of us that was born to fight. And we have to use our voice and utilize the resources. In closing, this was always my mother's wish for me. This is my wish for you, personally, professionally. I hope that you're always challenged but never defeated. And if you live with this mantra, it means that you will always be living opposed to just existing.